Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We often talk about just the sheer amount of information coming at us, right?
Yeah.
All the articles, opinions, data. It's overwhelming.
It really is.
But today, we're going deeper than the headlines. We're looking at something much more fundamental. The words themselves, their architecture.
Exactly. We've got this fascinating analytical blueprint, a really precise method for dissecting these complex, often charged words.
And our mission today, well, it's not just about finding a quick definition in a dictionary.
No, not at all. It's about tracking the entire life cycle, you know, understanding how concepts that feel like they should be stable, universal even, end up getting politicized or misunderstood or just loaded with emotional baggage.
So today, we're applying this framework to one of the most central words in, well, pretty much everything right now. Truth.
A word that's really taken a beating lately.
Absolutely. Truth is right there at the heart of every conflict, every debate, every crisis of trust we see. It often feels like it's used more like a weapon than, than a light. So we're asking that core question from Dr. Tamara Patzer, the one that kicked off this whole deep dive. What does truth really mean?
And maybe more importantly, how do we even find it when everything feels so noisy, so jammed?
Okay, so let's unpack this blueprint. It said we have to start right at the beginning. Trace the word's entire life cycle. Its earliest roots.
That's the first step. Find the anchor, the original or classical meaning. You know, before centuries of philosophy and politics started, well, pulling it all over the place.
Right. So for truth, where does that take us?
Well, if you go back far enough, the meaning is actually surprisingly structural. It's about character, stability.
Really? Not just facts?
Not initially, no. The English word truth, it comes from the Old English true. And that means faithful, trustworthy, reliable.
Faithful, trustworthy.
Yeah, it's deeply connected to integrity, to promises, even to things being physically stable. Like, think of a ship being true, meaning it's seaworthy, or a friendship being true, dependable.
Wow, okay. That immediately shifts things. So the original core wasn't about, like, verifiable data points.
Not primarily. It was about the character of the person speaking, or the integrity of the thing itself. It was fundamentally about trust. Foundational trust.
So for you listening, that's the first takeaway. Truth started as an attribute about dependability.
Exactly.
But isn't relying purely on character kind of risky? I mean, especially when societies get bigger, if you only rely on someone seeming faithful, could you get fooled by someone who's, well, charismatic, but just wrong?
That's the crucial tension, isn't it?
Didn't verification have to come in at some point to scale trust beyond just knowing someone personally?
You've hit it exactly. And that leads us perfectly into the second phase the analysis demands, following its historical transformations, century by century.
Because the meaning wasn't static.
Anything but. It shifts, sometimes dramatically, based on what the dominant philosophy of the era is focused on.
So we move from that Anglo-Saxon idea of fidelity to something else.
We do. Think about, say, the ancient Greeks. For someone like Plato, truth wasn't really about a person's trustworthiness or even his facts, you could see. It was tied to the forms, this idea of a perfect, unchanging reality.
Okay, the forms, like the ideal version of things.
Sort of, yes. Truth was out there. Objective, eternal. You had to use rigorous philosophy to even get close to it. It was a search for something transcendent.
That's a massive leap. From personal integrity to metaphysical perfection.
Huge. And then it shifted again, big time, during the Enlightenment.
Right, with science taking off.
Exactly. Science, empiricism, they took center stage. And truth became heavily weighted towards verification. It needed to be measured, tested, observed.
So the scientific method basically became the new benchmark for truth.
In many ways, yes. The focus shifted from the reliable person, the tree person, to the reliable measurement. And that shift right there from trustworthy fidelity to verifiable data, that's where so much of the tension we feel today comes from.
Okay, wow. So just a few steps. Integrity, then philosophical ideal, then scientific verification.
From who said it to what is it fundamentally to how do we measure it?
Yeah, you can really see how tracing that history shows why the word feels so fragile almost today.
And that fragility makes it vulnerable.
Which brings us to where it gets really interesting, especially now with everything digital. The analysis says we have to look right at the breaking point, cultural or political distortion.
When and how did the meaning, this kind of delicate balance between fidelity and fact, get twisted or weaponized, politicized?
Yeah.
Well, the distortion phase really ramps up when ideology starts dictating what's real instead of the other way around.
Okay, explain that.
In an era like ours, with mass communication, hyperpolarization, things like misinformation and ideology, they don't just attack the facts, they go deeper. They attack the very definition of truth itself.
So the goal isn't about finding truth anymore.
The goal shifts from, say, enlightenment to enforcement, getting people to agree with your version.
We see that constantly, don't we? Competing narratives, where you're basically asked to pick a team's reality.
Yeah.
My truth versus your truth.
Exactly. And that core idea of a shared, verifiable reality starts to just crumble.
It really does.
When people start feeling like their personal, subjective experience is the only reality that matters, or when sources just operate with zero integrity, zero faithfulness, that shared definition just evaporates.
The sources mention this too, right? Conflating political wins with what's actually real.
Yes, that's a key distortion tactic. An actual factual error might get excused or even embraced if it supports what's seen as the greater truth of the ideology. And that's where integrity, that original Old English root, is just completely thrown out for the sake of the desired outcome.
That sacrifice, it makes the next step feel really vital. If the current use is often destructive, we need something to ground us. Our framework says, look at the symbolism or archetype connected to the word.
Right. What are those timeless associations that might help?
So what are they for truth?
Historically, it's almost always illumination, light.
Like shining a light on the subject.
Precisely. Truth as light, clarity, integrity. The act of bringing something hidden out into the open. It's an active thing, a revelation, not just a passive state.
That makes sense. That symbolic connection to clarity feels like the perfect antidote to distortion, which loves shadows and confusion.
It is. It's why it feels so resonant, so powerful when someone speaks a difficult truth, even an inconvenient one. It feels like light breaking through.
Yeah, it really does.
But we also have to contend with the intense emotional resonance today. That's another crucial point in the analysis.
About emotional baggage.
Yeah. If you connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
you can't understand truth today without acknowledging that baggage. It's often tied up with feelings of betrayal, anger, just sheer exhaustion, or this deep uncertainty.
Because the trust has been broken so many times.
Exactly. It's not a neutral concept anymore for many people. It feels like a battleground, one that determines our sense of safety, personal and social.
And speaking of baggage, the framework also asks for one humorous or surprising insight. What stands out to you there, the current emotional landscape around truth?
Well, what's kind of fascinating, maybe slightly ironic, is how much we crave certainty from the truth, like absolute permanence. Yet intellectually, we know that what counts as the official truth, scientifically, politically, it changes, sometimes really fast.
Oh, yeah. Think about cosmology before Hubble
Or public health advice just a few years ago. Knowledge evolves, that's how it works.
Right.
So the surprise, or maybe the irony, is our almost emotional panic when a modern verified truth gets revised or updated. We demand this absolute permanence from a concept that, if you look at it scientifically or historically, has always been dynamic.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're putting this impossible emotional burden on the word, wanting it to be fixed forever.
And that very demand for certainty is probably what makes us more vulnerable to the distortions, the ones that promise a simple, fixed, ideological reality.
Okay, so where does this leave us? We've diagnosed the issue.
Yeah.
The word's been stretched from its roots in fidelity. It's been weaponized by ideology, and that's created this collective emotional fatigue.
Right.
But the point of this analysis, this blueprint, isn't just to point out the damage. It's meant to chart a path forward, right?
Exactly. That brings us to the final, really critical segment, reclaiming meaning.
Okay.
The framework mandates this short, focused dialogue on how we might, quote, restore the truest or most constructive sense of the word.
How do we do that for something as fundamental as truth?
It requires consciously bringing back that integrity piece and separating the search for truth from whatever political outcome we might want. It needs a kind of structured return to its original intent.
Okay, but practically, how? When the political charge is so high and the information landscape is, well, like it is.
It involves shifting our focus away from just the conclusion back towards the process. Reclaiming the word means integrating all these lessons from its life cycle.
Okay, so step one.
Step one, I think, is to prioritize integrity, that fidelity aspect, over immediate certainty, just the facts.
What does that look like in practice?
When you encounter information, Maybe the first question isn't just, is this 100% the final unchangeable fact? Because honestly, how often is that the case?
Rarely.
Instead, maybe ask, is the source operating with fidelity? Are they trying to be reliable, transparent, trustworthy, even if their findings are maybe incomplete or might change later? We need to rebuild trust in the process of trying to find truth, not just demand a perfect final product.
That's a really key distinction. Judging the source's intent and method, not just the current headline.
Yeah.
That gives us an ethical lens.
Exactly. And second, we need to consciously introduce clarity and compassion.
Okay.
Reclaiming truth means acknowledging the emotional weight it carries now. When we talk about difficult truths, uncomfortable ones, we need to use the word like that archetype as illumination, to clarify, not to attack or punish.
So the goal should be increasing understanding, reducing that emotional burden, getting back to the purpose of light.
Yes. If someone's clear intent seems to be just enforcing their view or stirring up anger, you could argue they're fundamentally moving away from the true purpose of truth-telling, regardless of what facts they might be using.
Right. Their lack of fidelity undermines the claim to truth.
Precisely. Which leads right into the third practical step. Consciously separate truth from outcome. Meaning, in our public conversations, we have to actively push back against the idea that a statement is true only because it leads to a result we like or that helps our side.
That's tough. People get very attached to outcomes.
It is tough, but reclaiming meaning means committing to the objective search itself, even when what you find is inconvenient or challenges your beliefs or is even painful. It's really a return to that deep integrity that was there in the word's roots, that faithfulness to the process.
So if everyone started demanding that kind of integrity from sources and focused more on clarity than on just winning the argument.
That collective shift, it could actually begin to restore the word's constructive power. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into truth, it really shows that the word's original strength came from that idea of integrity, of fidelity. And its biggest danger now seems to lie in confusing mere verification, just the data points, with that foundational trust, and letting ideology hijack the whole thing.
And remember, the real power here isn't just understanding truth better, it's the methodology itself, the 6-point framework we used.
Right, from the original roots.
Through the historical shifts, the distortions, the symbols, the emotional impact, all the way to reclaiming meaning.
It's a toolkit.
It really is. It's a toolkit you now have for navigating this crazy information landscape, for finding some genuine clarity.
We applied it to truth, but as you said, this structure works for so many other words that feel loaded right now. The sources listed examples like, woke, conservative, fake news, cancel culture, even freedom.
Exactly. They're all arguably suffering from similar cycles, historical changes, political distortions.
The real deep dive continues for the listener.
Absolutely. That's the provocation, really, for you listening. The next time you bump into a word that feels charged, weaponized, or just emotionally heavy, don't just react.
Pause.
Yeah, pause. Try running it through this framework we just walked through, track its origins, ask when and how it got distorted, and then maybe consciously think about how you could help restore its most constructive sense, focusing on that integrity, on illumination.
That act of just structured thinking.
Informed reflection.
That's the key. It might just be the key to thinking more clearly in a very, very noisy world.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.